Hello, I'm Warren Hall, the National Manager of Support Services at the American Liver Foundation. You know, whenever someone receives a challenging health diagnosis, it pretty much always knocks the person for a loop, as well as their family members and loved ones. There's a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions that come with it, which is very understandable and indeed very normal. Usually the next step in this process, and it is a process, is that a person will want to get as much information about their diagnosis or about their disease as they can. So a person can go from never having heard the word before, never having heard of their disease, to actually becoming almost expert in it themselves in a rather short period of time. And that's important because the more you know about your disease, the more empowered that you feel in dealing with it. But along with this, along with reading up on the disease, along with hearing what physicians and specialists are saying about it, there's another very important thing that people should do. And that is that they should seek out those who have the same diagnosis in order that they can hear about that person's experiences. What did that person go through, and how is that person dealing with it as a way for themselves to be strengthened by what they have to say? Now, we believe that this is almost as important as getting all of the medical information as well. That's why on the American Liver Foundation website, you will always find stories of people who are living with the various diseases right alongside of the information about the disease. Because again, we feel that this is equally as important to help a person, not only in their knowledge of their disease, but on their road to recovery. Today, our discussion is about cholangiocarcinoma, also known as bile duct cancer. And we're so honored that we have Lisa Craine with us. And Lisa is going to share her story of living with CCA with all of us and with all of you who are viewing this today. So Lisa, thanks so much for taking this time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So my first question would be, let's go back before your diagnosis. So what was Lisa Craine's life like before you had even ever heard the word cholangiocarcinoma?
Well, let's see. I'm from Akron, Ohio. I was born and raised here, and my husband David and I still live here. My husband David and I met when we were 16 years old on a blind date, and we're about to be 57, so we've been together a long time. We have two boys. Jacob is 29 and Noah is 23. I was vice president of a staffing and recruiting firm that I had been with for 22 years prior to being diagnosed. We loved to travel, we're foodies. Life was pretty joyful and busy and normal, lots of sports and activities. And we prided ourselves on eating right and taking good care of ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so then, so, you know, as I said in our intro here, I guess when you got your diagnosis, it was like a, you know, all right, well, let's stop here for a moment. So so when were you diagnosed? So what a time frame? So what are we talking about?
I was diagnosed with stage 4 intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma in 2010, and I was given 6 months to live. And here we are, 2021.
I was going to say, so we don't need to do the math too easy there to know that you're well beyond that time. So now leading up to the diagnosis, were you not feeling right? Was something going on that led you to see your physician and then to have your physician begin to look in this direction?
Actually, no, Warren. We had taken our son, he was getting ready, our oldest son, Jake, to head off to college. And we thought that he might be lactose intolerant. So we took him to see a gastroenterologist who happened to be a friend of ours. Our kids had, grown up together. And while he was examining Jake, he said to me, how are you feeling, Lisa? You look tired. And I said, well, I'm tired, but in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I volunteer, I sit on boards, I work full time, I'm a wife and mom. tired. Isn't that the whole world's tired, right? And everybody's busy. And he said, well, what else? What else? And he kept pushing. And I said to him, well, I do. He said, do you have pain anywhere? And I said, I do have a little bit of tenderness underneath my right breast. But other than that, nothing. And he said, I think maybe there's something wrong with your gallbladder. And he made me go the next day for an abdominal ultrasound. I did it over my lunch. I came back to work and they paged that he was on the phone. I picked up and he said, well, it's not your gallbladder. And I thought, great, I don't have time for gallbladder surgery, right? This is a good thing.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, but you have a mass taking up over 75% of your liver. He says, I don't think it's cancerous, but it's something we're going to have to address. And I think the last word I heard was mass in your liver. Sure. And I literally scooped everything up off my desk at work, and he had me going for blood work and tests. And so it felt like an out-of-body experience.
Wow. So that's amazing. And so first of all, kudos to your doctor.
Great intuition.
Wow. I know one in my own dealing with doctors, and I was surprised when my own doctor said to me during an annual physical that part of his examination is looking at me, and so, just his overall, okay, I know Warren, I've known him for a few years. How does he look? And so it seems that that's amazing that by looking at you, he sensed that even though you have this full busy life and the fact you have two boys, that he did notice that maybe something is not right. So that is amazing, and really, so kudos to your doctor. Because if he didn't say that, do you I mean, what was your previous medical, did you do any physicals? Would you have gone for a checkup had he not said that to you?
Yeah. And, I would have. I mean, my husband and I are really, and our kids, diligent about eye appointments, dental appointments, yearly physicals. I had mentioned this pain underneath my right breast when I was having a mammogram, and they even ultrasounded the area and didn't see anything. Come to find out, they were probably about 1 centimeter away when they did the ultrasound from catching the tip of the tumor. Not their fault, but so we were diligent about that. And I didn't have any liver signs. I didn't have itchy skin. I wasn't jaundiced. The only thing I had, but I had changed some things in my diet, was my stool was pale. And that is a sign of bile duct cancer and liver problems. Right. So if he hadn't have caught this, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So, all right. So now you go, and you get some of the testing. Now, just kind of walk us forward now from that time. So what was your path like?
So the ultrasound showed this mass. They didn't think it was cancerous, but they sent me to a specialist and who looked at the scan and said, I think you have cholangiocarcinoma. And this was locally. You have probably 6 months to live. You could do chemotherapy, which would not be curative. It would be more palliative. And the only potential curative choice of treatment for cholangiocarcinoma patients is surgery. And so my husband and we couldn't accept that. And so we reached out to the Cleveland Clinic for a second opinion to see one of their liver specialists. And we met Dr. John Fung, who is my hero. And he said, we can resect it. And so this all happened in a couple of weeks. It was like a whirlwind out-of-body experience. I was in 11.5-hour surgery. I needed 14 units of blood, and they removed 78% of my liver.
Okay.
Which sounds horrible, but I'm so grateful because, like I said, I would not be here today.
So what was the time frame? So from when you were told that you had the mass until you actually had the surgery, how long a period of time was that?
3 weeks.
Wow. Okay. So it is that quick. So what you just said, and this is great, I think, for people themselves who maybe are dealing with this, is that you said that it was a whirlwind and things happened rather quickly. So is that what people should kind of expect? I think once they're maybe a diagnosis is close, maybe not made just yet, but so somebody should really expect a whole bunch of tests and things like that, right? Moving ahead for them.
The time from diagnosis to treatment is a really, really important fact for patients with any type of cancer. cancer is active, it's aggressive,
Right.
it doesn't play nice. And so that's really, really important for things to move quickly, and not move very slowly. And of course, a second opinion saved my life. If I would have
Right.
gone with what the first doctor said, and, you know, I think I would have accepted, I had 6 months. And Warren, I think I would have lived to that point and then just given up hope and not
Sure.
gone any further. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, very important to move quickly.
And then, okay, so long surgery, they remove that. Now we know the liver is a really a resilient organ in a lot of ways. You know, it has that ability to regrow and to generate and stuff. Was that your experience? Is that what happened for you? And so from the surgery going forward, is that sort of what happens in a situation like this with this disease?
Yes. So most cholangiocarcinoma patients are diagnosed late stage because the symptoms don't really appear. Sometimes somebody will have a bile duct blockage, which will cause them to be itchy skin, pale stool, and be jaundice. And that's kind of a red flag then. But
Right.
most patients are diagnosed stage 3 or stage 4. After my surgery, I had adjuvant chemotherapy just to mop up any you know, microscopic little cells, but they got clean margins. They got the whole tumor. Everything looked really great. I did 6 months of chemotherapy and had some blood work, and my tumor markers had elevated again. And the tumor markers they run for cholangiocarcinoma are CA19-9 and CEA. So they scanned me and I had 2 new tumors.
Okay.
And I thought I was done with this cancer, but I've
Right.
come to learn that you have to, if you're diagnosed with cancer, you kind of have to treat it like a chronic illness. It's something you're going to watch for the rest of your life and be diligent about that.
Okay.
And so I was back almost a year to the date in a second liver resection. Luckily, my liver, like you said, had regenerated almost to its full size. And my second liver resection was 8.5 hours, removing 2 tumors. I had intraoperative radiation, which means while I was open on the surgical table, they radiated those pockets that they took the tumors out, and followed that with another 6 months of chemotherapy. And then just to kind of condense what goes on from there, I had my diagnosis and 4 recurrences. So I've had over 50 hours of surgery, or over 30 hours of surgery. I've had over 50 chemotherapy treatments, and I've had SBRT radiation 3 times. I've had a collapsed lung. I've been septic. I've almost died 3 times. But it just goes to show you, you can never, ever give up hope. Because if you told me when all that was going on that I would be no evidence of disease at this point in my life, I don't know that I could have believed that.
Right. Wow. So vigilance. So for a person to know that after initial treatment, after doing whatever needs to be done, they'll have to stay on top of it. So that means, you know, continuing to go to see a doctor, keep getting, whether it's scans or whatever type of thing. So that's going to be a normal part of the process moving forward then.
Right. Cholangiocarcinoma has a very high recurrence rate.
Okay.
And so the NCI, the National Cancer Institute's guidelines for follow-up are a little longer between scans than most cholangiocarcinoma patients are comfortable with. I had blood work, tumor markers every 8 weeks, and scans every 12 weeks for the first 8 years. I've just now gotten to scans every 6 months, which at first made me a little nervous, but it was time to move it to that.
Okay. And how did you, this may seem like, you know, sometimes we ask questions that seem silly or whatever, but how did you feel during this time? So it seems, if I'm hearing, it seemed like they were, you know, emotionally, right, the ups and downs, but how did you feel? Did you literally feel sick? Did you have good days, bad days? So how are you actually feeling while during this entire months of testing and procedures, things like that?
So yes, so the active cancer lasted about 3 years and in and out of treatment and that. And I had good days and I had bad days. I had some chemotherapies that my body did okay with. I had some that made me really fatigued. And, you know, recovering from a big surgery like that can be rough. The easiest of my treatments was the radiation. But good days, bad days, days where I felt joyful and days where I felt really sad. and one of my biggest sadnesses, and it still bothers me today, is, and I'll tell you because it's real, is that I feel like I've stole from my husband and my two sons that freedom, that carefree kind of thing, where they worry. If I have a headache, they wonder, does she have a metastasis to her brain? My back hurts. Do I have a metastasis there? So, you know, I really feel like cancer took that carefree freedom from my whole family, not just me. And that's why I tell people we were diagnosed with cancer, not just me.
Okay, and and I was going to ask about that, but since you bring that up now, I had a chance to very quickly on screen meet your son before we started. So so your family's there. So how did so what was their response to all this? Like, how did they? I don't want to say cope, but because I'm sure they, especially your sons, had no clue what this was about. So did you all try to educate yourselves together? Because I know there are some folks, my own father had lung cancer. And I remember at that point in time, it was almost like, all right, let's shield the boys. I have two older brothers, so there were three boys. And initially it was like, let's shield them from this, but I think we're beginning to realize that that's probably not the best thing to do. That we were diagnosed is a wow, that's a wonderful way to say that. So how did all of you walk this journey together through this? Did you all share information with each other? I'm sure the boys were still going to school and doing their thing. So how did that work out family-wise or family lifestyle-wise with you guys?
That was a really big decision for my husband and I, how we would choose and when to tell the boys, but we're a really open family, and I'm an emotional Italian, so I can't really hide my emotions. So my husband knew we were going to have to come home and tell them, right away. And it was a very, very difficult situation. We were telling my son, our oldest son, Jacob, about it, and we dropped him off at college on a Friday, and I had my liver resection, the 11.5-hour surgery on Monday. And so he was out of the house during it, but we kept him abreast of everything. Our younger son, Noah, who you met earlier, was diagnosed with severe anxiety after I was diagnosed. We both were. And at first I was really embarrassed that I was diagnosed with anxiety, but it's real and it's okay. And so it was really a very, very tough time in our family. And I think tough times can either bring you closer or spread you apart. And we really became closer as a family because we realized that even the little things like being able to have dinner together was a great day. I remember in the middle of chemo, one of my friends asked me, how was your day? And I said, oh, I had a great day. And she said, well, what did you do? And I said, well, Jake was home from college. We had dinner together. We took a bike ride through the neighborhood. And then we watched a movie on Netflix. And she said, so what did you do? What was great? And I repeated it. That is great. So as tough as it was, it brought our family even closer. And even my husband and our older son are not the emotional Italians. They're our stoic Germans. And but they've learned to open up and share. And we've all realized the most important thing, how fragile life is and how precious it is.
Yeah, wow, what an experience for everybody with that. So now you are, I was introduced to you by the cholangiocarcinoma organization, so I'm grateful to them for helping us to meet each other. So what now? So we know what you've done now in regard to medically and what you're doing. Oh, my other question was, did you work during that time period, or did you have to be off work? Because that's a decision. A lot of people, very often, they want to keep doing their life things, because maybe some people might feel like, well, I'm giving into the disease if I go on disability or something like that. What was your experience that time of, I was going to say, like, trying to keep life normal? And a big part of that for many of us, of course, is going to work. Were you able to do that?
No, and I wanted to be normal. You hit the nail on the head, Warren. Okay. I wanted to look normal. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to feel normal, but I wasn't. I was sick. Yeah. And so after my surgery, my first surgery and 6 months of chemo, my boss had kept my position open. I worked for a small family company and they were wonderful. And then I had a recurrence. And I went through another surgery and chemo and thought I would go back to work again because I loved what I did. And then my husband and I realized I was in the fight of my life, and it was more important for me to focus on getting well. And we didn't know how much time I had. And
Right.
so, and I wasn't well enough to work either. So it was a tough time.
Wow. That must have always been a lingering thought in your head, and I'm sure in the minds of your family members, that even though you were given 6 months, once you pass that 6 months, I'm going to guess that thought is always in your mind, do you think?
Yeah. When I get to speak to groups of doctors and that, I share my story, and sometimes they'll ask me, what's the most important thing that as doctors we can, share with our patients? And I said, please don't take their hope away.
Yeah.
And some will say, well, so are you saying we should lie to our patients? I'm like, no. Right. I said, but the difference between, my first oncologist said, you have 6 months to live, you're not a surgical candidate. You should go home, make memories, enjoy life. My second oncologist, who Dr. Estefan at the Cleveland Clinic, who I still have, he's been with me a very long time. He said, he took my hand and he said, this is a rough, aggressive, tough cancer. He said, but we're going to work together, and I promise you I'll do my best. He didn't lie to me, but I felt like I called my doctors my survival team, because I know that they all truly love me and want the best for me and my family, and they don't take my hope away. They're up front, but we work together. And that's super important, to have that multidisciplinary team for a liver cancer or bile duct cancer patient, all the disciplines represented, working together, and you need to trust them and build a relationship with them.
Wow. So you hear that, doctors out there who are listening, never be honest, but never take away hope. And I think, again, from my own personal family experience, I believe that that is so important. Because it's not false hope, but hope is always a real thing, and so therefore that's important. So what have you been doing now? So you've very almost passed over that. You said, when I speak to doctors, blah, blah, blah. So obviously you've turned this into something now, your experiences, and so what have you been doing to try to help other people, or just in regard to maybe an awareness or understanding of this disease?
So, when I was first diagnosed, it's a rare cancer. There's less than 10,000 patients a year that are diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma. And I felt really alone. Like, even though I had people and family supporting me and friends, I felt like I was so alone, like on an island alone. I remember once we were at a party and there were over 100 people there, and we got in the car to go home, and I said to my husband, I've never felt so alone. And he said, but we were in a big group. And I said, I felt so different than everybody. I felt like damaged goods. I tell people I felt like, if you ever have watched the movie Rudolph, I felt like I was on the island of misfit toys. I was the doll on the island of misfit toys. And so in 2011, I decided that even though I was in active treatment, I didn't want other patients to feel alone, to really struggle to talk to somebody who goes, yeah, I understand. And so I started volunteering for the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. They are an incredible place of hope. And what Stacy Lindley, their founder, has done, her brother died of cholangiocarcinoma. And she's taken this small organization and grown it into this international organization. They work with researchers, doctors, clinicians, pharmaceutical companies, and they bring us all together once a year, patients included, to learn. And so I volunteer for them. I work as a volunteer research advocate and patient advocate and a mentor. And then I mentor through our own organization as well. I've mentored over 400 patients. It's my passion. It's my love. People say, what does a mentor do? And I say, well, I support them. I chat with them. I help them navigate, if they want, second opinions, clinical trials, immunotherapies, and then I give them lots of love and lots of prayers. I'm Catholic. I pray for everybody. So as a mentor, I spend probably 4 or 5 hours a day mentoring patients, and I absolutely love it.
Wow. I wish I could be there, like when somebody says to you, now, who do you think you are to talk about it? What are your credentials in this area? And you probably say, have a seat and I'll tell you about it.
I'm not that important, Warren, trust me. I'm not a big deal. I'm just a patient who grew up with parents that loved people, and that's what I love to do, is to love people and to help them. And I study as a research advocate. Anytime I have an opportunity through the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation or other organizations, I take those opportunities to learn, because whatever I learn, then I can share with the patients that I mentor, and I can create awareness and help people learn about this, this terrible disease. So.
Well, and when you mentioned that about the, feeling out of it or like a misfit, that's something that we do hear a lot from people who have illnesses, especially the more serious illnesses, that, I've even heard people describe it as like, I almost feel like I'm wearing a sign, that says I have cancer, or, that says I have liver disease or something like that. And this is why I think the support is such an important thing, right? Connecting with other people, because nothing makes us feel less of an outsider or less of a misfit, so to speak, than meeting somebody else, right? And then once we all get together and we say, oh, look, there's other people who are going through this like I am, and there's definitely the support that comes from that is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use the expression misery loves company, or, now you hear people say, oh, cancer groups, the group you didn't want to join, but you had to. But there's an instant bond when you meet. The pandemic has been difficult because most of the mentoring has been over the phone. And sometimes, because I'm mentoring people all over the world, that's the way it always is. But my husband and I open our house up pre-pandemic, and hopefully soon, probably about 4 or 5 times a year. And we invite patients and caregivers over, and we serve dinner, and we talk, and we hug, and we tell our stories. And even though I've been through a lot, I think it has really molded me into a better mentor, because I thank God for the experiences I've had, the surgeries, the chemos, the radiation. I probably wouldn't have thanked him in the very beginning. I'm not going to, make it all Pollyanna, but I do now, because it enables me, as I'm talking to a patient and mentoring a patient, to say, I've had that surgery. I've had that chemo. Oh, I've had that one. I've had that side effect. I've had, that radiation. And, chemotherapy for me has been the gift that has continued to keep on giving. I have a lot of pain every day from nerve damage, many abdominal surgeries, but it helps me understand, and I think it makes me a more relatable mentor to patients. So
for sure,
as crazy as that sounds, I'm thankful.
Yeah, no, it sounds perfect. It's exactly what we know it to be, but to hear it from somebody like yourself is so important. We're having this discussion as part of a new webpage that the American Liver Foundation is setting up specifically on cholangiocarcinoma. So I want to thank you for being a founding part of this webpage for us. But if somebody, and we hear this all the time, so if somebody listens to this and they think, wow, Lisa, I really, she's touched me and what she's saying, how can somebody get in touch with your group if they want to just get some support or some follow-up?
Okay, well, there's a couple ways. You can go to cholangiocarcinoma.org. And I also, and you're going to think this is crazy, Warren, but I put my email and cell phone everywhere, and anybody can reach out to me personally, and I'm happy to mentor them, support them, or help them navigate those second opinions in that.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, again, as we said at the beginning, it's important to know the medical information. It's important to know the scientific information, because there's an empowerment that happens. But something very special happens when one heart speaks to another heart. and you have certainly, in sharing your story, have spoken to our hearts and whoever, all the many people who are going to be viewing this. And so we really appreciate your taking the time with us today to do that.
Well, thank you. And if I could say one thing, it's that
Yes.
there is always hope. And don't be afraid to reach out for help. It doesn't mean you're weak. It's beautiful to meet other patients and to be able to connect with them. And it's important to find the right doctors. So thank you for letting me share today, Warren. I really appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And we thank our those who will be viewing these. And again, you can go to liverfoundation.org. And we have a listing of the resources that Lisa just mentioned as a way to get in contact with her group and for other resources. So we thank everybody for joining us today.